In your opinion, the future is always interesting?
It's always interesting. Because we are not naturally open to the future. We tend to be suspicious of new food, new architecture, new thought. And yet, we should be open. Because only with time can you understand just how much potential the human mind really has.
Un momento per favore. Pronto? Giorgetto-san, I'm calling from Nikon. Ciao, it's good to hear from you, my friend. Giorgetto-san, we have a problem. The competitors are advancing very fast. We need you to help us design another professional camera to replace Nikon F3. It has to be the camera of the future. I mean, our future depends on it, Giorgetto-san. Okay, actually, I was just talking to someone about the future. I was hoping for something big like this after you got me to design that little plastic toy camera. Let's meet somewhere and talk about it, okay? Don't know much on no camera desu ka?
I think probably means Pikaichi.
Let's walk and talk about design. Mr. Giugiaro, if you were to receive an order now to design anything you like, what would you design? I would love the challenge of designing a building. There's simply a vast number of factors inherent in the completion of a building. For me, an imagination similar to designing a spacecraft would be necessary. When I was still working at Fiat, I saw sketches of future cities and future products in the US magazine. However, more than 50 years has passed since then, and none of that imagined vision has been realized. The idea of future as seen from the past is always interesting. Look here at this arch. Once a masonry arch, arco strutturale, was the height of new technology. You know, they were first systematically used by the Romans. The technology of spanning a vast distance without any support except a precise curvature that was self-supporting was a revolution. Technology moved on and still rapidly replaced masonry. But look at this example. When they first used it, they just replicated the forms of the previous technology in the shape of an arch. So they just copied. Even for these steel columns, the designers felt compelled to copy the unnecessary details of masonry or old marble columns in steel, which in my opinion is a strange combination. Let's say a transition period. Gradually, engineers stopped copying the aesthetics of masonry technology and used the steel's unique character to create the truss form, so there was no need for arches anymore. Later still, we see the modern combination of the compressive principles of an arch with hanging struts, which use tensile strength to carry the bridge load in a very creative way. You see that even with the new flexibility offered by steel and glass, the early designers just copied the same masonry and stone forms. It was much later that steel and glass took their own true character. I think the best design of each period is the representation of the best technology of that period. So, Giorgetto-san, what do you suggest for our new camera? I've been thinking. Let's create the language of the new technology and remove all the unnecessary elements of the old technology. Let's be brave, okay? Wakarimashita. And so, Nikon F4 was designed. The leap forward in Nikon F4 was greater than each of its predecessors, greater than the F1 to F2, and from F2 to F3. Nikon F4 was the camera that bravely made the transition to a whole new era of photography with greater reliance on electrical and electronic automation. This was a risky move and some negativity was understandable. However, Nikon was not alone. Canon, through its new EOS system, and Minolta through its Maxxum 7000, were following in a similar path. As it turned out, Nikon F4 was closer to that steel and glass building. New technology and innovation, but keeping many of the old paradigms such as the familiar knobs and buttons. Nikon F4 was a transitional camera that paved the way for Nikon F5 and became the foundation of future digital cameras. Nikon F4 was introduced in 1988 and was discontinued in 1997. Its predecessor F3 continued production until 2001. So relatively speaking, F4 was short-lived. It has a very strong camera body made of die-cast aluminum with plastic laminate and weather sealing. Nikon combined many of the latest camera innovations in one professional camera body. Some of these were Nikon's own invention and some were already introduced by competitors but were not perfected yet. For example, F4 was Nikon's first professional autofocus camera, although before F4, a number of Nikon's consumer cameras already had autofocus, such as Nikon F5 from 1986, also called N2020 in North America. The actual first autofocus SLR was Minolta Dynax, or Maxim 7000 in North America, that came out in 1985. 5 years later, almost 90% of all cameras had autofocus. F4 introduced integrated high-speed automatic film advance to professional cameras. F4's MB21 battery pack introduced the additional shutter button for vertical pictures. F4 retained the modular principles with its own ecosystem of interchangeable viewfinders, focusing screens, eyepieces, backs, and more. F4 provided the widest backward and forward lens compatibility of all Nikon cameras. Almost any lens produced by Nikon, except the recent Z series, can be used on F4. F4 introduced the double 4-blade vertical carbon fiber shutter curtain with a titanium balancer to reduce vibration. F4 had a maximum shutter speed of 1/8,000th of a second. F4 was the first professional Nikon camera with full PASM exposure modes. F4 introduced the full data viewfinder, providing much more information than just shutter, aperture, and light metering information. F4 had 1,850 parts and built from ground up. With this MB20 battery grip, it is 200 grams heavier than Nikon F3. With the larger MB21 battery pack, it is another 200 grams heavier. It does not present a problem. To the contrary, it allows for very steady shooting at low shutter speeds. The NASA version of F4 in 1991 had a 1024 by 1024 CCD sensor, which was 15 by 15 millimeters. So you could say Nikon F4 was also one of the earliest professional digital cameras. The only camera that seriously challenged F4 and gave it a real fright was Canon EOS 1, which was even more radical than F4 in the use of electronics, but dropping most of the knobs and buttons. Nikon also dropped most of the knobs and buttons in F4's successor F5 with the motto, "Imported from the future," which we'll look at in the next episode. This is the Film Advanced Mode selector. You need to press this button to rotate it. You have L for lock, S for single shot, CH stands for continuous high, which gives you 4 frames per second with this battery grip MB20 versus 5.7 with MB21 battery pack. CL stands for continuous low speed. CS stands for continuous silent. The silent feature is theoretical because most people will not be able to tell the difference between that and a single shot. Then we have timer, which is set for 10 seconds. It's electronic. It has a blinking light in the front, just like F3, but it's set for 10 seconds, not 8 seconds. This dial is for the exposure modes. It does not require any lock. We have full PASM mode plus one extra. M is for manual, A for aperture priority, S for shutter priority, P is for standard program mode, meaning that both shutter and aperture are automatically set. PH is program high. It is a program with preference for higher speed shutter. That is about 1.5 stops of shutter. For example, if the camera internally calculates a shutter speed of 1/90, it changes it to 1/125. This is the shutter speed dial, which does not require a lock, except for the X, which automatically locks it, and you need this button on top to unlock it. For manual and shutter priority modes, you can choose from 4 seconds to 1/8000th of a second. There are no intermediate shutter speeds possible, unlike F2 and F3. For program and aperture priority modes, however, the shutter is stepless and operates from a full 30 seconds to 1/8000th of a second, which is amazing. Flash sync is at the maximum 1/250 seconds, which is an improvement from F3's 1/80, which is achieved on the X setting. In F4, under program and aperture priority modes, the flash will sync between 1/60th of a second and 1/250th of a second. It is the camera's automatic choice. Nikon recommends putting the shutter dial on X. But in shutter priority and manual modes, the choice of shutter speed is yours, with some limitations. If you exceed the shutter speed of 1/250th of a second, for example, if you go up to 1/8000th of a second, the camera will ignore that and sync at 1/250 seconds. The hot shoe finally moves to the top of the finder like most cameras. It is an ISO-compatible hot shoe with 4 contacts. It provides TTL flash contact and flash-ready contact all built in. A big improvement on F1, F2 and F3, which all had an accessory adapter over the rewind knob. With F4, Nikon went out of its way to improve the automation in speedlights and flash photography in general. Using Nikon's own speedlights, F4 provides automatic balanced fill flash in TTL mode. A separate PC flash sync connection is also available. The metering system selector here is available on this multimeter finder DP20, which is the standard. Spot metering, which measures 100% of a very small 5mm circle in the viewfinder. Center weighted metering, which is like F2 at 60/40 and unlike F3, which was 80/20. It measures 60% of the 12mm circle in the viewfinder and 40% of the balance of the view. And we have 5-segment matrix metering, a Nikon innovation. The center-weighted and matrix metering are housed in the finder because the usual spot is taken by the autofocus CCD sensor. So it's almost back to the F2 design. The spot metering is squeezed into the body. The impact of this arrangement is that the spot metering is available with any finder you attach to the camera body because the sensor is in the body. But matrix and center-weighted metering are available only with this DP20 finder because the sensors are in the finder. Also, like in Nikon F2, the metering system of this finder is sensitive to the selection of the focusing screen. So based on which focusing screen you install, there may be an exposure compensation dial that needs to be adjusted with a small screwdriver. The default focusing screen type B does not require any adjustment. The exposure compensation that you set with that screwdriver shows in this little window here. The automatic exposure compensation dial is here, and it also has a lock. Exposure compensation is available from -2 to +2 stops with 1/3 stops in between. For Padawans, +2 is not twice the light. It is 2 stops, which is 4 times the light. On the top, we have this LCD illumination window. If light is not enough, you can rotate this knob over here and it gives you light inside and light outside. This round thing with a smiley face that's winking at you is a diopter adjustment. Pull it out and turn to set the value from -3 to +1. When you set it, then push it back in and it locks in place. If that adjustment is not enough for your eyes, then a separate eyepiece adjuster needs to be purchased and installed. Eyepiece shutter lever, like F3, is provided to prevent stray light entering and affecting the light meter. Unlike F2, there is no external indication of light meter recommendation. There are no LEDs or needles. Everything is shown inside the viewfinder. This beautiful viewfinder provides 100% frame coverage. It has 0.7 magnification as measured in a 50mm lens set at infinity. Central area of the viewfinder depends on the type of focusing screen you install. The data section has 5 segments, each with a wealth of information with 3 separate methods. LCD, which can be backlit, ADR readout, which can also be illuminated, and LED, which comes in red and green. Let's look at them in sequence. Top left LCD shows the exposure compensation plus or minus and the amount of compensation. Also the top left, a film frame counter, which duplicates the window on the top right of the camera body. The top center has aperture direct readout or ADR, which is literally a window to the small duplicate aperture ring of the AI lenses. You can install a pre-AI or G lens on the F4, but it cannot show the aperture. The pre-AI does not have the small duplicate aperture ring, and the G lens does not have an aperture ring at all, so you cannot see the aperture. Top right has focus indicators particularly used for manual focus using any lens. It uses phase detect to indicate the focus status. X means focus is not achieved, Red light arrow means turn to the right. Red left arrow means turn the lens to the left. Green means you've achieved focus. Red circle means exposure compensation is selected. Red flash symbol means flash is ready to fire. Now the bottom LCD from left to right. First matrix metering, then center weighted metering, then shutter speed, then AE lock, aperture setting or no indication in the manual mode. Then P for program mode, S for shutter priority mode. Finally, the electronic analog display of manual setting using a bar that extends left and right against the light measurement selection. It indicates how far you are from what the camera would recommend. The finder can be removed by pressing on a single small lever on the left. It slides out rather than lift off like F1, 2 and 3. So when it's in place, it is a lot more secure and therefore no problems taking a speed light over the top mounted hot shoe. If you remove the finder, you will have easy access to the focusing screen. There are 10 focusing screens provided for F4. They can be removed in the same manner as F3 by lifting off the front edge. The standard focusing screen provided is type B, which has a 5mm center circle, then a 12mm circle that indicates the zone for metering. If you really want split image type, go for type K, which has a 5mm split image circle followed by 1mm micro prism. Battery pack and grip. Here are the options. MB20, which is this one. Standard battery pack provides maximum 4 frames per second shooting with 4 AA batteries. For this battery pack, use the LR6 batteries, which are the standard alkaline manganese AA batteries, the same ones you find in any supermarket. Then we have MB21 high-speed battery pack, which provides maximum 5.7 frames a second with 6 AA batteries. For MB21, you can use the same LR6 alkaline manganese AA batteries or nickel cadmium batteries or NiCad. MB23 is another high-speed battery pack and takes multiple power sources including rechargeable NiCad batteries. MB22, which is the missing number, is not actually a battery pack but a power regulator for external mains power sources provided by Nikon as an accessory. A word of caution, AA lithium batteries are not recommended by the Nikon factory. Another note of caution, batteries with the plus terminal that are more than 6mm in diameter cannot be used. Don't worry too much, the ones that you buy in the supermarket are all fine. The MB21 battery pack has a dedicated battery check. However, MB20, which is this one, does not have a dedicated battery check. The same problem as in F3. To check the battery, put the film advanced mode on S, half press the shutter button and look inside the viewfinder. If the LCD comes on and stays on for 16 seconds, it means the battery is good. If the LCD turns off as soon as you lift your finger off the half shutter press, it means that the battery is weak and should be replaced. If the LCD does not come on at all, then you can assume either the battery is dead or the battery is perfect and the LCD is dead, which is even more likely. Use guesswork like you had to do with Nikon F3. Nikon F4 introduced automatic ISO setting for DX-coded films. As a matter of convenience, set the ISO dial to DX, which is the first setting on the left side of the dial. All the other ISO settings can be manually selected. DX is only for the range of ISO 25 to ISO 5000. If you want the ISO as low as 6 and as high as 6400, which are available on the dial, then you have to forget about DX and set it manually. If non-DX film is inserted but ISO is still set to DX, then the red LED will come on when you half press the shutter button. You have to guess what the problem is. Lens and lens mount. This one is a common lens that came with the camera. The Nikon AF 50mm f1.8. It is an AI lens, as you can tell with this ridge and second aperture scale. Film tests, which you saw earlier, indicated that it is very sharp and contrasty in almost any condition. To mount AI, AIS, AF, and G Nikon lenses, match the index on the top right and rotate left. To remove, press the button and twist to the right. the opposite direction of what you would have guessed. For pre-AI lenses or non-AI lenses, same thing. Just like F3, press the little release button here, flip the little tab out, and install the lens. Otherwise, the lens gets stuck, and you'll be sorry. F4 has 3 focus modes. M is for manual, S is for single servo autofocus, C is for continuous servo autofocus with focus tracking. In S mode, the camera will only work if it can focus and the green circle comes on. As long as the shutter is half pressed, the focus is locked. If anything goes wrong, the red alert LED blinks and shutter locks. Autofocus requires AF Nikkor lenses like this one. But for all AI, AIS, AI modified, and non-AI lenses, a system referred to as Electronic Rangefinder Focus Assist is available inside the viewfinder. You turn the focus ring, following left and right arrows until a green light comes on. That indicates that you are in sharp focus. This, however, requires lenses faster than f5.6, which, thankfully, is like 99% of all lenses. Some reviews claim that Nikon F4 autofocus is sluggish. It may be this super quick 50mm f1.8 lens, but I've also tested against other lenses. To my judgment, for a film camera, it was impressively quick and precise, and in all reasonable conditions there was no hunting. My impression is that the issue of sluggish f4 autofocus is more groupthink than reality. When you have 4 to 5.7 shots per second shooting, a whole roll of film can be shot in less than 6.5 to 10 seconds. That speed was very important to Nikon to maintain the top position for press and sports photography, but there's no point unless all the other processes in the loading and unloading the film are also optimized. Let's see how Nikon optimized those processes. Press the button and lift the rewind knob to open the camera back. Then insert the film cartridge. Now, Nikon introduced the easy film loading system. Fold the film to the red dot. No need to slot into any take-up spool. Just close the camera back and press the shutter button. It will auto-advance to the first shot. Ready to go. As only very minimal leader is used, you are very likely to get 37 shots instead of usual 36. When the film gets to the end, the red LED comes on. It will not automatically activate rewind. What you do is press this button and rotate the R1 lever. This releases the gears. Then press this button and rotate the R2 lever. This will auto rewind very fast. Remove the film cartridge and close the back. If you find that R2 has not returned to its default position, then move it back by hand. If you prefer to have control over the rewind, for example to keep a little leader out of the cartridge, you can also manually rewind using only R1 and the rewind crank. So, in theory, you can rewind and reload a new film in less than 20 seconds. Over in the front, there are 3 buttons. First is a depth of field preview. You press this button and it narrows your aperture to the setting that you've selected. You can see the depth of field inside the viewfinder. Around that, there's this turn knob that is for mirror lockup. This one is AE lock, which is auto exposure lock. When you press that, it holds the setting of the light meter, then you can recompose and shoot while you hold it. This one is AF lock or autofocus lock. When you press that, it fixes the focus where you are. You can recompose and shoot while you hold that. AF lock duplicates the action of half press, because you can also half press that holds the focus as you recompose. Now what if you want to do both at the same time? You turn this knob over here while you press the button itself. That is a dual action, autofocus and auto exposure, both of them locked. You recall episode 3 Nikon F3. In that episode, we visited the Nikon laundromat. There was a long, dirty laundry list for F3. As we've just seen, Nikon F4 washed all of those away, so there's no dirty laundry left over from F3. However, Nikon F4 has its own dirty laundry basket. Let's have a look at them.
コインランドリー
If the camera is set to S and autofocus, but it cannot lock the focus for some reason, it will not shoot. For example, if the lens cap is on. If you want to prevent the autofocus failure from locking the shutter button, you can cheat and put the camera in the self-timer mode. This will override the shutter lock, and after 10 seconds, it will take the shot anyway. Self-timer reset. Just like in F3, the self-timer does not auto-reset. So if you put the camera on the self-timer and forget about it, you think that the camera is locked up. You keep pressing the shutter, nothing works. But after 10 seconds, it will shoot when the camera is pointing to the sky. Shutter during film loading. During the film loading, the shutter does not operate, which confuses a lot of people. They think the camera is faulty. You open the back, you want to see if the camera works or not, you try to shoot, there's a noise which is the mirror working, but the shutter does not work. That is by design. That is to protect the inner curtain of the shutter. So don't expect the shutter to work when you open the back. If you want to see that the shutter works, take the lens out, put the shutter on T, release the shutter, and look from outside. You will see through the shutter to the pressure plate. The T setting. If you put the camera on the T setting, but the time exposure that you want is longer than 32 seconds, then moving the shutter dial away from T will not close the shutter as it normally would. And you may think the camera is faulty. What you actually have to do is to move the dial away from T and then half press the shutter button. But that's not guessable and it confuses a lot of people. During the very long exposure times, the camera does not use any battery power and is not fully awake. The half press of the shutter button will wake it up and complete the shutter action. The red alert LED. This alert LED can come on for many reasons. For example, if a non-DX film is inserted, but ISO is set to DX, then the red LED will come on when you half press the shutter button. Or the film rewind is finished, but you have not removed the film roll. Or if any abnormality occurs during film advance, the LED blinks and shutter locks. Or if any abnormality occurs during autofocus. So you will not know which one is the problem. You need to remember everything that can cause a fault, check them in sequence, and eliminate them before you move on. That will give you some psychological trauma. In summary, Nikon F4 is an important champion of innovation and a transitional camera. It bridged the old world of 1970s and 80s SLRs to the more modern body designs of 1990s and 2000s. It was fully electronic, but super reliable in most aspects of operation with the exception of the viewfinder LCDs. It takes minutes to master how it works, given the familiar and obvious knobs and buttons. So, is Nikon F4 the best professional F camera? Maybe. You might like to wait until you see all of the Nikon F episodes before you decide. Meanwhile, if you're considering buying F4, get a confirmation from the seller that its LCDs are okay. Then don't hesitate for a moment. Buy it now with a smaller MB20 battery grip like this one. The Padawan Dictionary.
There are too many of them. What are we going to do?
Bulb doesn't refer to a light bulb. Bulb refers to this funny thing here, which is a pneumatic release device for very old cameras. The idea was you press the bulb, air comes out of the tube, activates the shutter. As long as you hold the bulb, the shutter is open. When you release the bulb, it closes. That's where it comes from. PC stands for Prontor Kompur, very early shutter manufacturers in Germany. They collectively set a standard for synchronization of the flash. So it became Prontor Kompur Flash Sync. Both of those were subsidiaries of Carl Zeiss, and ever since the concept of PC Flash Sync was adopted by all cameras. Speedlight is Nikon's term for a flash gun. Speedlight as in L-I-G-H-T is Nikon's version of spelling. Speedlight as in L-I-T-E is Canon's copy of the same term but with a different spelling. TTL is through the lens. It can be applied to TTL light metering or TTL flash metering. PASM stands for Program, Aperture Priority, Shutter Priority, and Manual all in one camera. AI is not Cyberdyne. AI is automatic indexing, which is a way for Nikon lenses to communicate the aperture setting and the aperture range to the camera body. Automatic aperture. In the old days, this meant a camera that allows you to look through the lens at the widest aperture, then reduces it to the aperture that you actually chose a microsecond before it takes a shot. That was called automatic aperture. But later on, automatic aperture meant you choose the shutter, the camera chooses the aperture for you. LCD bleed means where the LCD inside the viewfinder looks like it's smeared or distorted, or various letters are dropping off as if they're melting. It's a problem with some old Nikon F4 cameras, probably affects about 70% of them. If the top left LCD doesn't work, don't worry about it. Those can already be seen on the camera itself. Frame counter is on top of the camera itself, and the exposure compensation can be seen on the dial itself. So no problem there. Make sure the LCD at the bottom has all of these features working. LR6 means alkaline manganese AA battery, the standard alkaline batteries you see in the supermarket. ADR refers to aperture direct readout. It's a second small ring that shows the aperture scale on Nikon AI lenses. Through a mirror system, you look at that ring from inside the viewfinder. If there's no light outside, you can turn a little knob and it will give it some illumination. It comes on inside.